3, 2, 1. Welcome back to the I Love Norfolk show. Doing another episode today with Kevin. Kevin, what's your last name?
Ordonez.
Ordonez. I would have mispronounced that.
That's all right.
With Alkaline. As always, we are here to tell your story.
Yep.
And I'm a big fan of, or Sean and I are big fans of like superhero stories or the movies and that type of thing.
Yeah.
And some of the most fun is when you do like a backstory.
Yeah.
Right, because you see the origins.
Yeah, exactly.
So like let's kind of start there. Let's look at what's the origin story of Kevin and what brought you to today.
Well, I happen to think I have a reasonably unique one. I mean, everyone's story is
You're just
unique,
special, man.
obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, so I grew up in a Navy family.
Mm-hmm.
My father was in the Navy. We had the same story as any Navy family. You know, 3 years here, 3 years there,
Mm-hmm.
move. And at a young point in my life, we moved to Japan, and we were living in Yokosuka.
How old were you?
I was 5.
Okay.
6,
Little,
something
yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
I remember I went through first grade through 6th grade
Okay.
in Japan.
Okay.
So we lived there for 6 years.
Pretty formative.
Yeah.
Did you learn the language while you were there?
You know, the basic stuff.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was such a youngster that I didn't exactly have opportunities to randomly chat with Japanese people.
Yeah.
You know, I was always
Sure.
with my parents, obviously.
Sure.
But yeah, I learned some of the basic stuff. But we lived on base in Yokosuka, and you know, that was when I really first had my experience with not only Japanese cuisine and culture, but just culture outside of what I, you know, at that point learned and grew up with. Because up until then, I think I was born in San Diego, and then I think we spent some time in Guam, and then we were in Washington State, and then we went to Japan. So up until then, it was like a lot of, you know, kind of standard, I guess, American growing up, eating American food, along with Filipino food. You know, my mom would cook Filipino food generally at home.
Sure.
And then we moved to Japan, and everything was different, you know. So I learned about the culture, learned about the food for sure. You know, first bowl of ramen was not what most people's first bowl of ramen was, you know, which is typically that dried
Top ramen.
packet. Yeah, exactly. That you get from the grocery store. But
In bulk,
mine
man,
was
super cheap.
yeah.
I was in the Navy. I bought those things in the boxes.
Oh yeah, I mean, so many people just live off them. That's you know, that's typically the college diet is just, you know, instant ramen.
Yep.
You know, heat it up in a coffee pot, whatever.
Yeah.
Who
Throw some
cares?
sriracha on it. Call it a
Sure,
day,
yeah. But my first experience with ramen was in Japan, and it was, you know, not only just ramen, but all Japanese food. I learned and kind of experienced for the first time actually in Japan. So, and it didn't really stick with me until, or I didn't realize how much it stuck with me until, you know, my adult years, where, you know, something that I really missed and enjoyed, and it kind of like I held on to the Japanese culture and cuisine and everything.
So you came back to the States in like 7th or 8th grade?
7th grade,
Okay.
2001,
Okay.
something like that.
Yeah.
I think it was somewhere around there, and went to middle school in Virginia Beach,
Okay.
and high school in Virginia Beach.
Sure.
You know, it's funny, people ask me my hometown sometimes, and I never really have an answer. I've subscribed to the idea that Virginia is my hometown or home
Sure.
state or whatever now, but back then I didn't know the answer, because it was like, I don't know, I've lived in like 6 places so far, so I don't really know.
I moved like I want to say six or 7 times before middle school.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Same thing. It was a handful of times. I was like, I don't really have a hometown, but when we moved here, the longest we've ever stayed here was in Japan. So at that time, I called Japan my hometown because, you know, before first grade, I didn't really remember much anyways.
Sure.
So
Sure.
from first grade to 6th grade, that's all I really knew. So I kind of grew up there.
You finished up high school in Virginia Beach. Did you end up going off to college or?
I did. I went up to New York, and I went to the Culinary Institute of America. And it wasn't always my plan to be a chef or whatever. I didn't have that same story like you hear where I grew up in the kitchen. My grandma was cooking. I was on a stool stirring up the pot or whatever. That is not my story. I didn't grow up doing that. My mom's a great cook or whatever, but she's not like a professional chef.
Sure.
I didn't grow up in the restaurant industry with, family owning restaurants. So I didn't have that, but I was always kind of the underwhelming child. My brother, I have an older brother, and he was the one with a 4.0.
Sure.
He was going to UVA, and he was like
he's checking all the boxes.
Yeah, exactly. He was the star child, and he was good in sports, and he had a lot of friends.
Sure.
He was really popular.
He's probably good looking too. I mean, yeah.
Whatever.
We don't like him.
No. But yeah, that's what it was like. So
I'd say
like,
that I tease I have a little brother, and we were always bantering back and forth.
Yeah, right, exactly. I mean, and I was the younger brother, and all I cared about was skateboarding, and that's kind of it. And I was in a band. I liked to play like hardcore and metal music, and all I wanted to do was like play music and skateboard, and that's all I cared about for my whole teenage years or whatever.
Sure.
And I wasn't particularly good in school. I wasn't like a failing student, but I would say I was like a
it's never something that was like
C to a B average student.
Okay.
So I was like very middle ground as far as academics goes.
Cool.
And I remember at one point, I think maybe this was my sophomore year or something like that. I had a kind of a low GPA. I think I'd failed one class or something like that. And so I was like, okay, I need an easy A somehow. I was like, okay, I'm in band. That's kind of an easy A, but I still got B's in band. But I was like, okay, I need another easy A class. I was like, okay, intro to cooking, intro to food, I think is what it's called or whatever. And I was like, that's got to be an easy A.
It has to be.
Yeah, I was like, all right. So I signed up for that class and started learning very, very basics of food and cooking or whatever, and ended up really enjoying it and being pretty good at it.
Was there something in the class in particular that you made and you thought, holy crap, like I can cook?
No, not really. It was just kind of the general experience of cooking. It was like creating stuff with your hands and starting with raw ingredients that, this turned out to be a cake or whatever it was, and I was like, this is cool. Like I kind of enjoy this process.
Yeah, I made that.
Yeah,
that was me. Yeah.
And none of that stuff was good. It all probably tasted like garbage, but it was fun to do. And then I remember my teacher, Mrs. Chadwick, was my intro to foods teacher, and she had kind of noticed that I really kind of enjoyed being in that class, and I did have an A in that class, which was probably one of 2 A's out of all the maybe 7 or 8 classes I had. I didn't have a lot of A's, so I was reasonably good for it, I guess. And she had suggested that I try out this kind of cooking program called CCAP, which is short for Careers Through Culinary Arts Program.
Okay.
And it's like a scholarship program for juniors and seniors to compete, and for seniors you win scholarships, for juniors you win like a class in the summer, like a summer cooking class or a camp.
Cool.
You'd go to culinary school for the summer for a week or whatever it was. And I was like, okay, I think I might give it a shot. And Miss Allen, she was like the at higher level culinary teacher.
Right.
So Mrs. Chadwick was like the intro to foods class, and Mrs. Allen did the catering class, which is like the next level. And Mrs. Allen was like the sponsor for all the Tallwood CCAP students. So I got together with Mrs. Allen, and she was talking about it, and I sent in my application, and they said, okay, as a junior you can compete. So my junior year I ended up entering the competition. Everybody makes the same stuff, so they judge you on your cleanliness, your knife cuts, your precision, and then obviously how the food tastes.
Sure.
So everybody makes an omelet is like the final one.
Okay.
You make this perfect French omelet, and you show the technique of how to make it, and the perfect kind of tri-folded omelet that's rolled. It's kind of a little bit pale yellow, not a lot of wrinkles in it, like almost like a... If you can do it with no wrinkles, you've perfected it. You know, like it's not like an American omelet, which is folded in half and it can kind of be kind of brown, nice golden brown or whatever.
Right.
And then, so I ended up in the junior competition for the juniors. I did the prize. The way the prize structure is you win. The top person wins a camp to CIA in New York.
That's pretty cool.
And then the next 5 win a camp to Johnson and Wales. In Charlotte. I think that was the first year that they moved to Charlotte. And then everyone else wins like a summer camp program or something like that, like locally.
Yeah,
I think
cool.
it was at Lansdowne High School. And I ended up winning both the Johnson Wales and the CIA camp my junior year. So I went to both camps. I don't even know how that really happens, to be honest, because you weren't supposed to win both. You win one or the other or whatever, you know. And I ended up going to both Johnson Wales and CIA.
That's huge, man. That's a cool.
Yeah, and I thought it was
experience.
really cool. So I spent a week in Charlotte in the summer before my senior year with other students. And this was like a big program. So there was like hundreds of kids that came from all over, I don't know, Virginia, North Carolina, whatever. High school students that were in the camp. We stayed in the dorms.
Sure. How did your parents feel about this kind of going on? I mean, I imagine
they loved it. Yeah, they were super supportive because, like I said, up until that time,
you didn't have like a huge direction.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, I wanted to play in
Skateboard,
my
play
hardcore band and skateboard. Like that's all I cared about, and I didn't have good grades.
The true meaning of life. Yeah.
And I wasn't really great at sports. I played a lot of sports, but I wasn't like an all-star sport guy. You know, I wasn't the top player in my soccer team by any stretch. You know, so. It was like they saw something that I genuinely was interested in and that I was like kind of good for, you know, at that age. So they were super supportive for sure. And they were happy that I was like actually doing something or going towards something.
So you go to this camp at the end of kind of your college career, right?
Yeah. Or high school.
High school, sorry.
Yeah.
And then let's kind of move a step forward. Is this the first restaurant that you've ever opened?
Yes.
Now, if I remember correctly, when I talked to Dylan, you had kind of run a small thing out of his. What did that look like?
So we called it a pop-up restaurant.
Yeah.
Which when we first started, it was in like 2013.
Okay.
And we started it November 24th, 2013.
And for the people at home, what is a pop-up restaurant?
So I guess there are a lot of different definitions for it, but essentially it's the most basic definition is a restaurant. It doesn't even have to be a restaurant, but any sort of concept that, you know, shows up temporarily in one location or various locations over time and
hosted by
does something.
Yeah.
In our case, it was a restaurant. So we rented a space in Chesapeake that was already a restaurant. It was called the Cutting Edge Cafe.
Okay.
And it was owned by Matt Hayes. And, you know, we had a mutual friends and we had been introduced that way. And I pretty much was like, hey, so this is my idea and I want to do this ramen shop. You're not open for dinner. I'd like to just open at dinner time and I just want to make some ramen and see if people like it, you know what I mean? So he was like super about
it. A very
it. He was
lean
like,
way to start your kind of business.
Absolutely. You know, I mean, I didn't have any money. I don't have money now, but I definitely didn't have money then.
Sure.
Way less then. So I remember I asked my friend to loan me $5,000 to buy equipment and, you know, maybe some food and whatever, and kind of just jumpstart a little bit. So he loaned me the money and we started it off. And I think we hit the ground running because we did one event. Our very first event, like I said, was on the 24th. And the reason I know that is because it was on my 26th birthday.
Okay. Which
is the first day that we opened. And I I think we made a Facebook event page and it was like, okay, at that point we didn't even have a name for the restaurant at that point. Yeah, it was like ramen. We're making ramen.
Yep.
Here's the location.
That's right.
There's no name for our restaurant at that point. And we did an event page and it was like, okay, why don't you sign up on this event page to make a reservation and then we'll just log you in or whatever. I think we did like 100 and something covers. We sold out 100 reservations, over 100 reservations in like 4 hours.
Wow.
For that November,
really? That's
for the
insane.
November pop-up. Yeah. And then the December one, we did another one a month later in December. Same thing, Facebook event page.
Yeah.
I think at that point we had a name by then, which was Alkaline.
When did the symbol come into the play? And this is the symbol
not
here,
till a little bit later, so
Okay.
we didn't even have graphics or logo or
Right. It's
designs
just
or
kind of like
anything.
we're doing ramen. If you
I remember
wanna
I
come-
drew it on a piece of paper. I drew this like it was like a graffiti style kind of design that nobody could read except for me because I drew it and I knew it said Alkaline, but nobody else could read. It just looked cool. And I asked one of my friends who was familiar with like graphic design or he did it or whatever, and I was like, can you just like make this a thing?
Sure.
And he made the design. Like I said, it wasn't a great one because it was like not legible or whatever. You could not decipher what it said.
So how many I guess pop-ups before you're like, holy shit, this might be a thing?
After the first two, because we did a single one in November and then a single one in December, and the December one we sold out it was like 150 or so reservations in less than an hour for the December one.
You're like, oh man, I think this can be a
so when we
might do this.
opened that and they were like crazy busy and everyone really seemed to like the food and they thought it was a cool, interesting idea, and I was like, okay, like
I think we got something.
Yeah, let's see where this goes. So we officially opened in January. Well, technically, it was the 2 in November, but then we officially long term in January, and we were calling it a residency versus a pop up.
Sure.
Because it was like
Kind
I
of
want to
more
open for 3 days a
long-term.
week.
Yeah. Okay.
Instead of one day and then one day and then one day, it was like, give me 3 days a week. I'll open like almost as a normal schedule.
Sure.
I think it was Friday, Saturday, Sunday at that point. And, I wanted it to be the eventual goal was always to open a brick and mortar.
Cool.
So I know I wanted to treat it as if it was an official restaurant.
And then how
back
long
then.
until you got to this place here?
Like 3.5, 4 years.
Yeah.
4 years.
Well, that's a big
4
deal,
years.
man.
It was a long time.
But you had the proof of concept before you even opened up doors somewhere, which is a big because restaurants are pretty known for their high failure rate.
Oh, of course.
I mean, if you take the place, what's the place over there on? Is it Granby Street? Right next to it used to be a hot dog and burger place. It's right next to
the famous
McDonald's.
Uncle Al? Wait, on Granby Street.
Across the street from Crackers and Mihogar.
Oh, up there. It used to be, I don't remember, it was a long, long time ago, but it was called Umo, I think. Is that what
I
you're
want to
talking
say I've seen at least 6 or 7 places coming.
Yeah,
in and
and
out of there.
now it's like a French bistro place. What's the name of that place?
Well, I guess my point is like we were talking about like passion and like what do you like calling in life, and I think I can't imagine it being more difficult as someone who's passionate about food. And this is one of the things that Ann and I talked about, is that like the food is like a representation of you.
Sure.
Right. And then for you to go out of business is like this rejection of who you are. Right.
Absolutely.
I can't imagine how hard.
I
that would be.
mean, I guess in any business, and as a business owner, you're accepting a ton of risk. And it's. I guess sometimes it gets a lot more personal when it's a business like the food industry, where so much is driven by the chef or the owner or whatever that it's like, this is like my creation. If people don't like it, then I guess in that you can connect it that they don't like me or whatever.
Sure. How are we on time, Sean? Okay, great. Yeah.
So it's tough, and it's like I said, there's a lot of risk, and there's a lot of people who have opinions all the time.
Yeah, we talked about that a bit.
Over time, you learn to kind of drown them out or ignore them or whatever. But everybody everybody has an opinion.
Sure.
Some
Sure.
of them are just going to absolutely hate you no matter what.
Well, that's a good question. Maybe what are the voices that you think like these are the ones I want to listen to?
I mean, generally, I do listen to all of them. It just the amount that I actually like meaningfully take in is kind of what I've learned to dial in and kind of gauge over time. Is I'll listen to anybody, but
do you have?
Does that mean I'm going to change something? Not always.
Yeah.
Sometimes it does, but not always.
Also, like let's take Dylan for instance. And Dylan comes in and says, "Hey man, this was fantastic," or maybe consider doing this. Like that might be a voice that you listen
absolutely.
to, right? Yeah.
I mean, my colleagues and people in this industry that I respect and that I'm friends with, I'll absolutely take their advice.
Sure.
I mean, always. I'll never turn down advice from somebody who's probably been doing this longer than I have, or more successfully, or whatever.
Right.
I'd be foolish not to.
Have you ever seen the Hero Dreams of Sushi documentary? It's so good.
Yeah, of
that's
course.
a really good one.
I just rewatched it again maybe 2 weeks ago.
That's funny.
Actually.
Have you seen Cooked by Michael Pollan?
Cooked. Is it on Netflix?
Yeah, it's a 4-series documentary.
I think I have.
He talks about fire, earth, water.
Yeah, I have seen that.
And he talks about like the different aspects of cooking and kind of their history. He goes like barbecue and bread and cheese, and I thought it was really interesting.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I've seen it. There's a lot of really good food documentaries out now, which is cool for me because those are the ones I really enjoy watching.
Sure.
Obviously.
So let's talk a little more about. All right, so we kind of covered the background. One of the things that you and I talked about when we first met was like you have this passion for what you've kind of created, which is not necessarily traditional Japanese food.
Yeah.
Partially because you can't get all the vegetables here.
Right.
Could you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, this is coming from somebody, like I said, I essentially grew up in Japan, my elementary school years or whatever, eating Japanese food and almost being immersed in Japanese culture. And I knew that opening a Japanese restaurant wasn't really realistic, like an authentic, or I don't want to say authentic, a traditional Japanese restaurant. Because it was like, okay, like what am I going to do? Import all the pork and vegetables and whatever from Japan so it could taste just like Japanese ramen?
Sure.
No, I'm not going to do that.
It's a little cost prohibitive.
And also my background was in French fine dining. I mean, at CIA, most culinary schools generally will focus on French cooking techniques because
what's the oldest tradition?
Sure.
That might be an overstatement. It's one of the oldest, most developed traditions.
Sure. Yeah. Exactly. I would agree. So after graduating from CIA, I was working in French fine dining, and I was living in DC, and I was working for Michel Richard, and that's like what my entire cooking and training background was. So even that, I knew I wasn't like trained in Japanese technique. I had some experience in it. We had a class where we learned Japanese techniques or whatever, but that wasn't the focus of my training. So I knew I wasn't like a Japanese chef, and I couldn't do it like the Japanese people or whatever. So I didn't want to try. I wanted to do what I knew I could do, which was just my own food or whatever, which was a mix of French cooking techniques and the Japanese cooking techniques that I've learned and kind of all over. So I wanted to make food that reflected really that. And over time, it kind of evolved. It evolved from using my training to create and develop a menu to what it is now, which is ultimately I'm trying to make food and create this restaurant and this menu that's developed based off of my life, which is most people would just call it like fusion cuisine. And I think, the most basic definition of that is here's this type of cuisine, here's this type of cuisine, now we have a fusion.
How do we make it meet in the middle somewhere?
Right. And that can be something as simple as like, Korean barbecued meat inside of a taco, whatever. And people do that all the time, and it's great, and it's delicious.
Do you have, so I asked this question of Ann, do you have a dish or something specifically on the menu that you feel like is the best representation of Kevin?
Ooh. Like one single
like this
dish?
is me. Yeah. I'm gonna push you to give some.
I don't know. I don't know if I can label one single dish.
Is it anything like the culmination you feel like?
I think the whole menu really is, because like what I was trying to get at was
that's fair.
is that
so pick one and like break down like what do you think that one dish kind of embodies for you?
It's the growing up as a first generation kind of Asian American, like a Filipino American, you know. So when we try to create menu dishes and develop new items and techniques or whatever, it's about kind of telling the story of a first generation Filipino American. It's like, you know, I'm not trying to create fusion cuisine. I think fusion cuisine is great and whatever, but that's like too simple. If I want to be very simple, then that's how I describe it, as this is a fusion restaurant.
Okay.
But I want to kind of dive a little bit deeper into it sometimes and say it's not just a fusion restaurant. Like, this is how I ate and how I grew up eating, you know, as a first generation Filipino American, you know. Like, I grew up eating noodles, but I also grew up eating like cheeseburgers and hot dogs and chicken nuggets. But I also at the same time ate a ton of rice and fish and, you know, Filipino food and Asian food or whatever. So it was like, I'm not just trying to take American food and Japanese food and do this, right? It's like,
it's more of a representation of how you grew up.
Of how I grew up,
Yeah.
exactly. Like, this is like
That's
the
interesting,
style of food that I ate as a child.
Cool.
And I learned about it, and this is what I knew as normal to me.
Cool.
Versus like, okay, let's make a Korean taco.
Sure.
You know, like, and there's nothing wrong with that. That food is delicious and I love it. But I think for me specifically, it's too simple to describe my food as
Fair enough. Fair enough.
fusion.
So we kind of did your backstory, where this is where we're at today.
Yeah.
Do you have kind of a vision of what you want to see Alkaline become into the future? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm always looking and pushing towards growth. In the brand, in the restaurant, and in the menu, and the way that we kind of execute on our hospitality and whatever it is.
Yeah.
I'm
we
always
talked
trying to
about
grow.
that when we first met, was that growth just for growth's sake, undefined, can be very unhealthy.
Right.
Like, and so it's like, well, how do you want to grow?
Right.
Right. It doesn't mean more restaurants. It might mean, like you said, like, well, maybe we can improve upon how we even put the dishes on the table.
Exactly.
Right.
It's always about getting better at the things that you think you're good at. So we're like, our work is like never done, right? I mean, you could call it successful, whatever, but you know, success is like not one stage to me. It's like,
It's a goal that always is changing.
yeah, you're continuing to try to work at that, and if you don't, that's, I believe, one of the biggest factors that leads to failure and leads to you having to close your business down because you just stop, you know, trying to get better at everything.
I think it also leads on a deeper level, like, to dissatisfaction.
Yeah.
Right. When you become stagnant, you don't feel like
Yeah.
you're striving towards something.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
When you don't have a goal, you're just kind of like going through the motions. You lose all real, you know, sense of pride and
in Hero Dreams Sushi is almost that story, right?
Yeah.
He talks about, like, he's been doing it for 40 plus years.
yeah. He was.
Right?
I
And
think
he's
when
like,
they filmed that, he was in his like 80s or something.
right.
He was.
And he talked as if like he was still learning.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, holy crap.
It's very true,
like,
though.
One
I
of the
mean-
guys that's regarded as one of the number one sushi chefs in the world is
Absolutely.
going, I'm still figuring stuff out.
Yeah, and he still kind of looks at himself like a student sometimes, you know.
Right.
And I relate to that a lot. I mean, I'm pretty young to be in the position that I'm in now. Like I said, I opened the restaurant when I turned 26. Most 26-year-olds aren't doing that,
Or
you
even
know?
looking to.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Most of them, a lot of them, in my experience, are still trying to figure out what they want to do, which is like totally fine. But you know, I've always been kind of a risk taker.
Sure. Let's do this.
Yeah, and as I get older, the risks become more calculated.
Sure.
But I've always been a risk taker, so you know, it was like, you know what, I'm just gonna kind of jump in,
Cool.
and I'm gonna go for this and
Yeah, man.
see kind of where it goes, and I'm gonna just continue to move on. And
I'm excited. I mean, it's always fun. The more people that I've gotten to know in Norfolk, and particularly restaurant owners, it's always fun to kind of see where they came from.
Yeah.
And most of them have some type of idealism like you do. I think
Sure.
most of them are like, I want to produce this into the world.
Yeah, I think to be in this industry, especially at this level, at the ownership level or whatever, the chef ownership level, you have to be like a certain type of person. You have to have a little bit of that, like that dreamer quality where you're
Sure.
like, you know, like
Sure.
I'm always dreaming about
What could be.
what could happen or what could be or what
Yeah.
you know what the glorious vision of the future holds, you know what I mean?
Sure.
So I think to some extent most of us do kind of share that kind of trait where
Yeah.
we're wanting to see what's out there and what we can do and how we can push ourselves to different limits, you
Mhm.
know.
So we're at the point now where you have to come up with a giveaway.
Right.
Right. So what are the folks at home? What are they fighting over?
You know what? Honestly, I don't know. I mean, I'm open to a lot of stuff. I mean, like what we were talking about.
Mhm.
The most obvious and probably the most simple is like a gift card or
Sure.
something like that, which I'm definitely open
would
to.
be,
But
maybe a suggestion would be like, it'd be fun to have someone come in and you make a dish specifically that's not on the menu for like a group of 4 people.
yeah, we could absolutely do that.
Right? I
Yeah.
think that'd be kind of, because it's unique and they get to experience maybe even you coming to the table and explaining why it's there and how you made it and why you made it the way you
Sure.
did. That'd
Yeah.
be kind of fun, and it would make it so that you get to experience your restaurant, you individually, and then something not everybody else gets to experience.
Yeah, I mean, we could definitely do that. I mean, we could easily make it something where it's like, you know, a group of 4
Mhm.
will come in for dinner,
Mhm.
and then we'll give them a totally curated meal that's off menu,
Yeah.
100%.
Let's do that. I think that would be really fun.
Yeah,
Okay.
I can
All right.
definitely
So,
do that.
guys, if you'll comment, maybe what is your favorite, and this is going to be broad sweeping, Asian style food, right? And share the post as always. You'll be entered into the contest. We'll draw in 2 weeks from whenever this goes live, and you'll get to experience Kevin's kind of passion of what it means to both be an American and, you know, from growing up overseas.
Mhm.
And then he's going to give you something super special. You get to experience something off menu. Everybody else in the restaurant is going to look over and say,
Yeah.
what the hell, I don't get that. And you're like, no,
Yeah,
you do not.
we definitely do it sometimes. We'll have like something special back here, and maybe friends will come in or customers that we've had for a long
Yeah.
time, and we'll just kind of bring it out
That's
and be
fun.
like, "Hey, here's this," and it was really fun for us to create. We want you to try to have some of it. You know.
Sweet. Well, Kevin, thanks for letting me come in, and
Thanks for having me.
yeah, man, it was just fun. I really enjoyed it.
Cool.
Another
Awesome. I
episode of
appreciate being
I Love
here.
Norfolk show with Kevin, Alkaline. That's a wrap. That's it.